everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. My name is Ashley, and I am on the marketing team at Impact Group. I will be your moderator. Everyone is on mute at this time. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, you can let me know in the chat box. There will also be time at the end for questions and answers, so feel free to submit your questions during the presentation. With that, I'll hand it off to Ed.
Thank you, Ashley. And George, good evening. Dr. Kohlrieser, thank you for joining us from the campus of IMD in beautiful Lausanne, Switzerland. We're honored that you would come and participate and talk to our listeners about your powerful leadership concept and principle, secure-based leadership that you've developed. Before I do a formal introduction of George and read his mini bio and let him tell a little bit more about IMD and the High Performance Leadership Program, let me just do a quick bio of myself and Impact Group. Ed Chaffin, I'm president of Impact Group. We are a St. Louis-based WBE certified, second generation certified firm that focuses in three main areas. We are the global leader in spouse partner relocation, integration, and job search. We provide career transition or outplacement services and have a thriving global leadership practice. So that's Impact Group. George, I'm going to read your bio briefly from your website. Dr. Kohlrieser is an internationally recognized expert on leadership, an award-winning best-selling author, consultant, media commentator, and motivational speaker. In his role as professor of leadership and organizational behavior at IMD Business School in Switzerland, he draws on 40 years of experience as a psychologist and a veteran hostage negotiator. He's acclaimed for his introducing the hostage metaphor to leadership development. George, again, welcome, and thank you for taking your evening time to be with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Ed.
So, George, tell us just a little bit about IMD and this powerful leadership program that you're actually in the middle of delivering this week at Lausanne, High Performance Leadership. Help our listeners understand who IMD is and a little about High Performance Leadership.
Okay, very good. With pleasure. The IMD is a top-rated business school based in Lausanne, Switzerland, totally dedicated to executive education. So we are working with executives from all over the world, and I happen to be the founder and director of what is the High Performance Leadership Program, now running our 74th session, which has been going on since the year 2000. And the point in that program, which, by the way, is the flagship program of IMD and is part of what makes us receive, for the last 5 years from Financial Times, the #1 rating of open enrollment programs. And this is a program that's based on taking 60 top leaders and have them engage in a week of intense focus in developing skills in leading themselves, leading others, and leading organizations, with the goal ultimately being how, as a leader, do you inspire? Secondly, how you build talent. Thirdly, how you build and drive change. Fourth, how you build high-performing teams, and how you build a culture. And the reason Ed is so interested in this and knows this program extremely well is that part of the focus is understanding loss, which is at the center of what your organization is doing, helping people through transitions and helping people through loss to come out on the other side, to understand that any change, any loss can be turned into an inspiration if certain things happen. How's that for a summary, Ed?
That's beautiful, George, and thank you so much for that. And yeah, there's also another little piece why I'm so passionate about the work that you do, and I am an executive coach. I have gone through the program that George leads myself about 7 years ago, and then I've been blessed to coach in that program from time to time. I coach a couple of times a year in the program, and it truly is a transformational program. We see leaders come in on Sunday and walk out on Friday transformed in their thinking about who they are as leaders, but really understanding at a deep, deep level how loss does affect us and impact us. So as we transition, the slide that I have up now, George, is I've got the cover of both of your two books, Hostage at the Table, Hostage at the Table and Care to Dare. And the leadership program we just talked about, that program was built off of George's book, Hostage at the Table. And I believe that book has been translated into 11 languages, most recently.
Well, it's actually up to 17, Ed.
Oh, my gosh. I'm asleep.
With the recent one in Holland.
Oh, yeah. That's what I thought the most recent was in Holland. So anyway, both, and then Care to Dare is the deeper dive on the topic that we're going to talk about today. So if we go to our agenda slide, Ashley, so it's from this book that we're going to guide our leadership, the secure-based concept, and we're going to establish some foundation for secure-based leadership. And we're going to do the interview with George in two parts. We're going to focus on some of the principles of high-performance leadership that he's developed. And then the second part, we'll tie some of those concepts into and help our listeners gain a new perspective on why the loss of a job for someone can be the most significant life event for a person, but also for companies and organizations, and how they can recognize that taking a compassionate approach to restructures and reductions in force could really be a game changer. It can be a protection of their brand, but also protect what they say, which is that they really do care about people, but sometimes companies do have to make these changes. So, George, before we move into, and then after the second part, we will open it up if there's some questions, for a few questions and answers before we wrap up. So George, you coined the hostage metaphor, and you like to say, we don't have to have a gun at our head to be held hostage. What do you mean by that?
Well, when you have a weapon to your body or to your head, or you are physically a hostage. And hostage negotiators are engaging hostage takers at this physical level of hostage taking. And what they have to do is create a bond with that hostage taker, even if they don't like him. They have to be able to go into a dialogue to understand how they are affected and what they want, what motivates this hostage taking. And 100% of the time, it's going to be a loss that drives that. And then through the concession making process, you get the person to come out, give up their hostages, give up their weapons, knowing full well they're probably going to go to prison. Now here's the point. What would you guess the success rate is? I know you know, Ed, but I'm asking the listeners, what would you guess as a success rate for hostage negotiators? It's actually...
I was going to say, George, since the listeners are on mute, I'll play
okay, they can't say that, but that's a rhetorical question, man. So the point is it's 95% success rate. It's incredible because it involves leadership at its deepest level, and it involves helping change the mindset and the emotional state of a hostage taker into another state of hope, thinking of some positive benefit in the future. So you can be a physical hostage or you can be a psychological hostage. And there are people who have things happen in their life, always based around loss, in which they feel like a victim, they're held psychological hostage, and they never get over it. It may be regret, it may be shame, it may be guilt, it may be all kinds of things. Job loss is one of those things some people end up being a psychological hostage to. It's an end to what they are experiencing in life, and they no longer feel the joy of life or a joy of going back to a job or working again. So we've described this as a psychological hostage, and the same techniques that are used in hostage negotiation that get this 95% success rate can actually be used in psychological hostage taking.
And thank you, George.
Yeah, let me just add, you can be a hostage to virtually anything in life, to a boss, to a situation, or even more to yourself. You can be a hostage to your mindset or to the emotions that you are blocked with.
And our belief systems as well. Excellent. Ashley, go ahead and move to the next slide. And the next slide is the mind's eye in determining our results. And so, George, in the High Performance Leadership Program, at the very first evening of the program, you asked the leaders this question: is the brain naturally, basically positive, or is it negative? So help us understand today why you asked that question, and how does it relate to what you were just talking about a minute ago about being a psychological hostage, and how do we focus our mind's eye?
It goes directly to the point, to the brain, and to understand that we are fundamentally at the deepest level negative. And the reason is that we are focused on danger and looking for danger and pain as a way to survive. However, we have to override that, rewire it, and come back to not just look for pain and danger, because in the extreme you end up paranoid. We have to wire our brain how to think positively, to focus on the benefit. And this is where, if you look at the slide, you see there's a difference between playing to win and playing not to lose. 80% of people never get over being a hostage to their fears, to the anticipatory grief, to the idea that they are surviving. They are victims. And about 20% are focused on the benefit. Now, anyone can rewire that brain, and you and your company, each one of you, are working with people to help them go through the losses of losing their job, their homes, whatever the losses are, to come back to find hope again and to benefit by looking to what is positive. And why this is so important, as you know, Ed, is that the focus of the mind's eye determines, as you'll see at the top of that slide, the state you are in. And the state determines the results. So some people are just in a very victimized state, they're in a negative state, they're in a cynical state, they're in a depressed state, an angry state. You name the hundreds of states people can get into. And this is based on how they see, how they use their mind's eye. And for the majority of people, the future is nothing more than a memory of past experiences. And so they are always a hostage to their own emotions, to their own beliefs, or their own situations in their life. You are setting people to be free and to come out of this hostage mentality.
Well, powerful statement you just made. For most people, the future, and I'll use a different word, is a videotape of the past. And the ability to rewire their brain and record a new video is where we're going to guide our listeners to today, and how to do that. And George, I've got your book, Hostage at the Table, open where I am right now in Atlanta. And on page 30, you have a very profound statement. It says, unless we actively intervene in this process, this is talking about loss, these past experiences that filter through the brain will become a prediction of the future. And you actually give an example of someone who goes to a job interview and fails, does very, very poorly, and then their mind's eye, their mindset is now focused on that. That's what's going to happen. It becomes self-fulfilling prophecy. The next interview will be the same unless they intervene and understand the power of focusing on the mind's eye.
Exactly. And the question is, how do we become positive? How do we learn to be positive? Because being positive is a choice. Being negative is a choice. And there we have to go back and understand our relationship with our mother, our father, grandparents, brothers and sisters, siblings, teachers, etc., bosses, of how we can rewire our brain to come back to the positive. Because the brain hates pain. So the brain will do anything to avoid pain, and that becomes a problem, because to live life you have to go through pain, face it, and as we're going to talk later, the secure bases in our life are the ones who teach us how to do that.
Excellent. All right, Ashley, if you'll move on to the next slide. So if it is a choice, and it is, it truly is a choice for us. And I'm going to ask a question a little bit later, but I'll tee it up right now. How come some of us can make that choice easier than others? And that's rhetorical for now. There's two other really important elements to bring into before we get to the definition of a secure base. And it's this concept and the idea of the cycle of bonding. And so when a person experiences separation or loss, help us understand what's going on here, and especially as it relates to the focus of the mind's eye, George, and why this is such an important element to human motivation.
Okay, so the way this cycle works is it starts by being able to create connection. One of the biggest reasons people do fail in life is they do not know how to connect. And the second reason is they do not know how to go through loss and separation. In between those two states or those two positions is this bonding. So from attachment comes the bonding process. And bonding is how you connect to people, to pets, to homes, to goals, to dreams, to almost anything that will inspire you. It means you are interested and you have an emotional response to that connection. Certainly the most common is people, so that when you are with someone who you're bonded to, you will feel inspired. However, it doesn't end at that point. The bonding goes through this separation risk and reality sometimes of loss, separation, disappointment, and so forth. All bonds, whether it's for 1 hour or for 75 years, come to an end. And when we go through that separation, what happens is the grief process. We need grief. Grief is fundamental to go through the process of opening the heart, opening the mind, opening the soul, opening the life experience to come back and rebond to attach again. And Ed, I know you have seen it, probably your people listening have seen it. There are people who go through a loss and they never get over it. And losing a job is one of the major, major challenges in life. A loss of any kind can provoke a big reaction. And if we go to the next slide, can you move to that one? You'll see that the bonding cycle leads to this separation and grief, which is fundamental. In organizations, people grieve. In failures in life, they grieve. In personal losses, they grieve. And the grief process is a very important one. It goes from denial through the emotional part of anger, missing, the crying, and the pain in the heart, the broken heart, to the fear and even terror or panic over a loss, to the rationalization, the mental part of coming out, accepting it, and then going to a new attachment, forgiveness, and finally gratitude. So the question is, when do you know you have gotten through a loss? When you come back to the joy of life, come back to the joy of work. And so like with losing a job, there are people whose lives come to an end. Even suicide over the loss of a job, because they lose their identity, they lose the people they're attached to. All kinds of other losses are connected with that. So the only way to go through that bonding cycle is attaching, bonding, separation, grieving, and then come back and attach again. And if the brain hates pain, which it does, the goal is to avoid pain. The best way is never bond again. So somebody is stuck as a victim in whatever has happened in their life. Does that make sense?
It does, and again, in referencing in your book, Hostage at the Table, you having been held hostage 4 times in your career, and fortunately, you were the 95%er, and that you're still here with us today, thank God. You were successful in those hostage negotiations, but we hear of workplace violence, and as you mentioned earlier, even possibly suicide. Is it about being stuck in grief? Is that what it's really about, George?
It's 2 things. One, it's active grieving when you are in the pain of loss and you are angry or you're sad or you're full of fear. It activates in the brain and you can do all kinds of negative things. Or it can be long-term. It goes on and you move into a state of hopelessness, state of despair, state of depression, and a person then never gets over that. They stay locked into that. There is no loss too great to overcome. No loss that is ever too great to get over. Nelson Mandela spends 27 years in prison, comes out speaking reconciliation and forgiveness. He came out with the idea, let bygones be bygones, moving and thinking to the future. He learned that from his grandfather, and he ultimately went on to become president of South Africa. We all in our life journeys have losses, whether it's loss of a job, loss of a child, loss of part of our body in an accident, loss of a house that burns down, loss of moving from country to country. And the challenge in every individual is, what part of the journey are you entering in, are you involved in? And your organization is helping people go through that powerful, painful transition of losing a job and giving up what was there to find a hope for the future, to be able to come back to the joy of life. There is no reason you have to stay stuck in victimization.
Yeah, and you know, as a coach in the high performance leadership program, one of the things I see often, George, and especially for us guys, and I'm willing to own this, is, you know, we go from the loss to the rationalization, the intellectual, idealistic, I'm fine, I'll be okay, without really touching our pain and touching and putting words to our emotions. And so this is, you know, an interesting concept when it comes to self-leadership and recognizing the power of being willing to understand the true effects of what has happened to me when I have experienced that loss, and then being willing to go through the process and ultimately head toward that new vision of the future where we're living a life of joy and gratitude.
Yeah, it's a very important point, and I'm sure the people listening to this will relate to this, that men die earlier than women by 7 to 12 years. And the reason that the factor analysis and the research shows is that they cannot get over the grief that they experience in life. They cannot cry, they cannot express the anger, and so they build a wall around their heart. And if you are with somebody for 40 years or more and you lose that partner, the survivor is terminally ill or dead in 80% of the cases in 2 years. This is a profound statistic. And that loss relates also to job losses, because people can actually suffer physical consequences, deep physical consequences as a result of the grief. We call it all kinds of things, but make no mistake, they are grieving. And one of the things is for your people to pick up the signs of grief, because you are grief collectors in one way. You have been helping people get through the emotions of what their loss is going through. And everybody has their own experience of going through that. And I think we're going to talk about that later, in how we tap into that and help keep the heart open.
That's a great segue into our next slide then, Ashley, because this concept of a secure base, and I'll read the definition. A secure base is a person, place, goal, or object that provides a sense of protection, gives a sense of comfort, and offers a source of energy and inspiration to explore, take risks, and seek change. And so, George, give us some examples of secure bases. What do those look and sound like?
Okay, so a boss can be a secure base. A parent can be a secure base. A friend can be a secure base. A counselor, a coach can be a secure base. Ancestors can be a secure base with they've passed on. Homes can be a secure base. Countries can be a secure base. Symbols can be a secure base. Religion can be I mean, there's thousands of possibilities, including going back to memories, the memory of your childhood, adolescence, reaching certain goals, anything that inspires you. And the important thing here is, if the brain is fundamentally negative, what has to happen is something to turn that negativity and the search for pain off, to stop the defensiveness, and that's secure bases. Secure bases inspire to shut the brain down so that you then see the opportunities, you see the beauty of life. You're able to come back to seeing something different. And you're able to then take risks and seek change, explore. Change, and this is very important for your listeners to understand, we do not naturally resist change. How many of you have heard we naturally resist change? It's not true. We resist the pain of change. the fear of the unknown. And when you have a secure base, whatever that secure base is, it will help the brain shut down its natural or primitive drive to look for the negative, to look for possibilities, to look for how to thrive rather than just survive. And so many of your employees who are helping people through the transition of the displacement from their job, you become a secure base. And one of the things that is terrible is when they are not empathetic, not able to be caring, not able to create that bond, even if you don't like them, even if they're victims, whatever, like a hostage negotiator. And the thing is, once you have that secure base, you become part of the inspiration to look for opportunities. And the beautiful part about it is, as you know, Ed, is that when you have a secure base and you go through something new, outside the box, take a risk, you actually create new neurons. You create new neurons every day by change, taking risks, seeking ways to explore. And the thing is, how can I think you hear the blinds going down, that's automatic.
Very, very lightly, it's okay.
It'll be over in a second. So the thing is how to be able to come to a point where you are thriving, how to be a secure base and to have secure bases.
You mentioned something a second ago that reminded me of a comment you make just about every time in the high performance leadership program when we talk about personal loss and organizational loss, that if you ever get to the point as a leader where you can terminate people and not feel any pain or emotion, it's time for you to hang it up. And that's because if you can't have some empathy and understanding, you can't be that secure base when you're delivering that unbelievably bad news to someone. So
that's very important to understand, and that's the caring and daring part of it. People need a secure base. They need something to inspire them. They can feel that protection, and then you can dare people. The goal is not just safety of a secure base. The secure base is the foundation to help the person go back to explore again, come back to life, to be able to go out and face pain again. And the thing is, when people are displaced or they lose their job or they change from an organization, the losses are very profound in many, many ways. And the question is, can they go through the grief? Can you be a secure base, or can they find secure bases in their life to help them to come back and rebond to life in a new way?
Okay, let's move, Ashley, to our next slide. So we've established, if we go back to the beginning, the hostage metaphor, the mind's eye, the cycle of bonding, and the grief cycle, and then gave the definition of secure base. And George gave us just great reasons why the secure base, what they can be and why they're so important. But now let's tie it all together from the very beginning of why a secure base is the strength of a secure base and why it's so important. And George, one story you tell, I think just every HPL I've ever been a part of, is the story of a high-performing a woman executive that suddenly had a drop-off in performance. Someone knew about you and your program, sent her to high-performance leadership, and it was there that she discovered something. And I think you know the story. I hope you know the story because it didn't prime you. What happened, and what was her solution?
What happened is that she was an extraordinary ice skater, and she was, even at the age of 14, a champion in her country. She won first place. And then she went on to go into the European Championship of ice skating, and she came in second, which is really a success. It's a powerful success. But she took it as such a deep failure. She gave up. She was grieving deeply, gave up skating, left it go, and for 40 years didn't do it. And it was affecting her because she was not able to, she lost her confidence, she lost her ability to be strong and be able to deal with conflicts. And that's when her boss said, go get some help. She had to grieve. She had to go through the grief of the pain. And she said the most painful part was the fact that when she would be on the ice and they would be flipping those numbers, her father was always critical to her. And her coach was always critical to her. And the mother was passive. She never had a secure base. And so once she could do that grief and she could find secure bases in her life, she came back to the joy of life again. As a matter of fact, after leaving the program, she started to ice skate again. She gave it up. She gave all the medals to her mother. It was a beautiful set of talents that she had developed over the years, not even letting her daughters ice skate. And then she went back and rediscovered all the beauty of those years and ultimately got 2 promotions within 18 months because she found that strength in her. And so when you see this people, who is it that were our secure bases? What's the relationship we establish with our mother, our grandmother, a stepmother, adopted mother, it doesn't matter who, stepfather, adopted mother. We need that to feel loved. And you can have people who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s who've never resolved the feeling of being loved. And I'm dealing right now with a situation in which a very top executive was abandoned by his mother as a 9-year-old. And he has just built a wall around his heart and he will not let anybody touch it. And you see, this is about losses of people and how we go through that. And what you have to understand is the person has to grieve, open their heart again to come back and reconnect. We've had 4 major suicides here in Switzerland in the last 2 years. The CEO of Swisscom, the CFO of Zurich Financial, the CEO of Zurich Financial, the top chef in the world, all of them were unable to go through the grief of what was happening in their life, and they ended up committing suicide. So you see, pain is a very, very important thing, and one of the common features is they did not have secure bases to help them through that.
Yeah,
so, and then on the other side, you see goals. Goals can be a secure base. So that's how you learn to be confident. And talent development is not about success. Actually, focusing on success can produce fear of failure. When you have someone who is so focused on success, like this young girl, when she was 14, her worth was built in their success and not in the learning, not in the effort. You see, it actually produces a fear of failure. So when she comes in first in her country, comes in second in the European Championship, she feels like a failure and cannot get over and see what she has to do in terms of effort. What we have to reward people, children, employees, is effort, not success, because focus on success produces fear of failure. It's what we put effort into that is involved in talent development. So that's the other side of the cycle. With secure bases, you feel safe, you're able to go through exploration and playfulness, and ultimately build high self-esteem.
And George, to that last point you just made, you know, what we see in the work that we do, people's very identity sometimes is their job, their title, their role. And after they've been with an organization 20 or 25 years, all of a sudden, boom, that's gone. And so the recognition and the principles that we've established on this call today, I'm hoping our listeners will be able to take that in and understand. They may even know people that have experienced this. They may be experiencing themselves, and just recognizing that it really, that role wasn't their identity. There's something better for them out there if they can find that secure base. And you tell another story of a lady who lost her mentor, who then left the program and reestablished the goal of finding a new mentor and was able to get back on track. So having that strong, secure base as a person is very powerful as well. So of that definition of secure base, the people and the goals are the 2 most important. They're all important, though, for us to recognize symbolically, even metaphorically, how they affect us and how we see ourselves in the future. So actually, if you'll go to the next slide, we'll begin to so.
Can I add just one point to that? Can I add one point?
Yes.
Because your employees in your organization, you have to be training yourself in how to bond. You have to, whether you're male or female, you have to be able in your own way to bond with people in order to be a secure base. Without bonding, you will never be a secure base. And so we see people who try to be doctors, they try to be counselors, they try to be leaders, they try all kinds of things, but they miss the bonding, and it stops their success.
Excellent point. Thank you, George, for making that. We're going to get into a little of our differentiation in just a minute, but we do believe it is one of our differentiators. That is, as a company, we live out our mission, and our coaches recognize we're there at one of the most important points in times of a person's life. So the slide we've got now is most of us know this. There's 5 major things, and there's more, but these are the top 5. And the 2 that are highlighted are 2 of our lines of business that we come along organizations and help them when they're moving from one city, or people, and help them when they're moving from one city to another, or one country to another, and or when they are experiencing a job loss. And I think we've heard a lot of explanation, but is there anything else, George, that you would like to add about what makes the loss of a job so potentially challenging for some people?
Well, it's not just the loss of identity, of having their identity built around their job. I am worthwhile because of that job. And you can have people who are 40, 50 years old, or even older. They go to their death, and they never feel worthwhile except by accomplishing something. But the highest risk is when they lose the job and they have no secure bases around them, that secure base is their primary focus. And so they don't have the bonds to protect them. And moving is very powerful because you not only have to deal with the loss of where you're going from, and it can be the home, the country, the food, the parents, and so forth, whatever, but you have to then rebond to where you're at. And many people move and they never rebond. So they move into states of chronic loneliness after moving, and it's really challenging when you're moving a family, because it's a tough thing to move kids. And as it's easier when they're younger, but when they're adolescents, or for spouses. If you have an employee moving to another job, they may be able to focus on their work, but the spouse doesn't connect with people around them, the kids don't connect to schools, and you have people who go through many, many moves. After 3, 4, 5 moves, like a military family or an expat, the kids just stop bonding. And you can see all kinds of social problems emerge from that, including physical problems. Failure in school, depression, addiction, all kinds of things emerge as a result of this failure to be able to rebond after one move or a repeated set of moves.
Yeah, I heard a story the other day from an executive coach, just to amplify what a challenge job loss can be, and that a gentleman, an outsourced IT company came in and took over that function for his company, and he still came to the same office, still went to the same cube, still worked off the same PC, but he didn't work for XYZ Corporation. He now worked for the new outsourced IT company. It took him 3 months to tell his wife that he had, quote unquote, lost his job, when he didn't really lose his job. And I just find that just as an amplification of what a challenge it is for us as we lose these kinds of things in our life. And so, Ashley, if you'll go ahead and go to the next slide, and just talk about, what does it mean to have a compassionate approach to career transition or outplacement? And I'm hoping that the listeners have heard today what we think we bring to the table as a company is, we do live out our mission, and our coaches live out our mission, which is to make a positive impact one relationship at a time, as well as our vision for our company is to build a better world by empowering people to find and grow great careers. And so the thing that separates us, I told George this when we were talking about him doing this webinar for us, and I really believe this with every fiber of my being. I think we're one of the last companies out there that really still takes this one-to-one approach for coming alongside someone in their deepest point of loss to help them make that transition in an effective way. Our coaches understand exactly what they're going through. They understand the power of bonding. And we also understand that we need to be flexible in our approach. So I'll just tell one more quick story, and then we're going to move into the next slide about organizational loss briefly. But about 1.5 years ago, we were doing a project, and this one landed on my desk, where the lady lost her job while she was out on bereavement leave for the loss of her mother. so she's experiencing 2 of the top 5 losses. And so I personally called her. I sent her a copy of your book, George. Her secure base was her husband's family in Europe. And so she was smart enough to recognize to take 2 months off, and they went to Europe, and fortunately they were financially able to do that. And then when she came back after and was ready to engage with us for her career transition services, she and I had another call, and her network was activating quickly, and it looked like she was going to have a job. And so what we did is we flexed, and we gave her one of our leadership coaches, one of our coaches who does both career transition and leadership, because that's what she needed to focus on. So again, we're not here to do a big infomercial, but the point is we allow people to be where they are, and we help them move quickly through the process, sometimes at their pace. But I think we really understand the deep loss that people are making or they have. So Ashley, if you go to the next slide.
Wait, can I add something to that, Ed? Well, you got it right here, the wide range of emotions. There it is. I was just going to say, when your coaches are engaged in this bonding process, getting the mind's eye focused in another direction, being a secure base, the key is going into the emotions, getting the person to express the pain. See, if the brain is hardwired to avoid pain, many people don't like to grieve. They won't go through the grief, or they stay locked in the grief because any new attachment is a threat. The best way to avoid pain is never bond again. So based on the principles of hostage negotiation, a hostage negotiator has to create this bond with the hostage taker and understand the loss and be able to help them come out of that mindset, give up their hostages, and come out and have hope again. And it works in 95% of the cases. But here's the thing: the hostage taker does not ever tell the hostage negotiator does not tell the hostage taker you have to come out. They help delve into the emotions. So a couple of the basic hostage negotiation techniques is you never tell people what to do. You give them choice. You ask questions, go into the emotions, and learning to accept something without having to agree with it. This is a very big one, because many people who can't agree with something will immediately put up a conscious or unconscious a psychological barrier because they don't agree. You have to accept things you don't agree with. And then you get into a dialogue. Why are they feeling this way? What is their experience of losing their job? People have to talk about their pain or express their pain before they'll ever come back and rebond to something positive. And one of the things people do is often rescue people rather than really legitimately caring about them by having them delve into the pain. As coaches, they have to be able to talk with people about pain and not brush over it too quick.
Right. And so, George, what we're doing in one of our last couple slides is what we're seeing is that what may get missed sometimes in this conversation companies are having about restructures and reductions in force is the people that are left. And another very quick story, a relative of mine had just gotten a promotion about 3 or 4 months ago, and then her boss whispered in her ear, oh, we're getting ready to finally do that restructure, and there's going to be a few people lose their job. And next thing you know, I'm getting a phone call, and they're freaking out, yet they just got a promotion and they're safe, because that was the first question I asked. Do you still believe your job is intact? Oh, absolutely. Then what's going on with you? Well, so what's going on? Organizational loss is what's going on, right, George? And we see organizations miss this piece often, the effects on the remaining people. Any thoughts you'd like to add to that?
Absolutely, because it's called survivor's guilt. You have it on the slide. It's the feeling that you survived, you are left, and you can't enjoy what's left because you're still grieving or anticipating a grief. So you have to be able to go through that and be able to come back to the joy of that job and understand that as people leave around you whom you're attached to, you have to say goodbye to them. You have to say goodbye potentially to everyone in your life, everything in your life, but not too soon. And you see some people go into anticipatory grief, they leave too soon, or some people start blocking it and they don't come back to feeling the joy of what they're doing. What we really have to understand is that people are needing to express what's inside, and when they're left back, like in a merger and acquisition, the fundamental driving force of failures in mergers and acquisitions is not bad strategy. Sometimes it is bad strategy. Most of the time, it's failure of the leaders to get people to rebond or reconnect or be aligned around a new strategy because they still miss the old company. They're still grieving for an old boss, an old team, no matter what. And it's the same thing that happens when you're in a car accident. Your best friend dies and you survive. That survivor guilt can destroy your life because you have a certain grief about your friend dying in that car accident.
George, the final comment I'll make, that's perfect tie-in to most of us are familiar with Gallup, and they do surveys, but they also are very big in the employee engagement. And their Q12, their 12 questions, there's one question that they have figured out. If you just ask this one question, it's the leading indicator of employee engagement. Do I have a best friend at work? And that's what you're talking about, is that we bond with people at work. We're connected with people at work. And that's what was going on with this relative of mine. Is she knew that one of her friends was going to lose their job, and that's why they were freaking out. So thank you for the rest of that. And we just encourage organizations that this is something that really needs to be paid attention to. There has to be an intentional, focused effort on dealing with the aftermath of mergers and acquisitions, restructures, and reductions in force. Ashley, if you'll go to our last summary slide, we'll just summarize our key points that we've talked about. And George, this has been a great conversation, but here's the number one: never be held hostage. Recognize the loss of a job as the loss of a secure base. Be willing to explore the grief for the loss. Find new secure bases to bond with, help focus the mind's eye on positives. Turn those losses into personal triumph. See the positive in the benefit, and then find a company like Impact Group that understands these concepts and has a high-touch, one-on-one coaching philosophy. George, any final comments that you'd like to make before we take a couple, 3 questions or so?
Well, I think the most important thing is helping as a secure base to be there to help whatever the loss is to turn it into an inspiration. That's one of my TEDx talks, by the way, and if maybe you can give them my website later. To turn loss into an inspiration. It's a TEDx talk, and it takes great stories of people who failed to do that and stories of people who had tremendous loss, and it became an inspiration for themselves and others.
And I'll give a hint to our viewers: you're one of those people who took a deep loss and turned it into triumph. So we provided the hook for them to, and we do have your web address on our final slide. So Ashley, do we have any questions from the listeners?
We haven't received any questions just yet, but for those of you who are attending, feel free to send those now, and I know Ed's got some final thoughts that he'll share with George.
Yeah.
And let me just add one point here, Ed, because based on principles from hostage negotiation, if you see people stuck in grief or people who are in complex grief as their job replacement or loss of a job, one of the things you have to do is respect no. When people are saying no and they show resistance, you have to accept that. Because when people lose their job, they often feel powerless. Something has happened to them. They're a hostage. And when they say no or they're finding their power again, that's often going to come out as no. So as a hostage negotiator, when I get a no, that's a good thing, because I am now hearing that person respond with their personal power. I just have to come back with a question to understand why they're saying no, or what would they would need as an alternative. It's a point to continue the dialogue and discussion. And so this is why acceptance is so important as opposed to agreeing. Agreeing is not necessary. You can accept something you hate, you dislike, the worst kind of thing, but you don't have to agree with it. And most people cannot do that. They either, when they feel that disagreement, they want to push back and break the bond.
Excellent. And so the final, or a question I'll ask you, George, then, unless, do we have any questions from our listeners, Ashley?
Yes, we have one come in.
Oh,
How
cool.
can junior management convince senior management that the organization needs to understand and implement these concepts that you're sharing today?
Wow.
But that's a good one. That's a good one. The key is dialogue, and first of all, creating a bond, and then asking. Don't tell them what's needed. Ask them, and focus on the benefit. How could this benefit the organization, the employees of the organization, the engagement of the organization? Well, and that's a real leadership skill, standing up to authority, standing up to a boss by not pushing back with force. You see, there's a whole concept of the difference between power and force, because many type A kind of personalities, mostly men or even women, they try to use force to change someone. The best way is to find the power in the state, in the belief, in the emotions you have that are positive. And in that position, you engage in helping the person see the benefit of some change. Do you want to be more successful? Do you want to hear what I think would help me be more engaged? And so you open up that dialogue and have to be good at dialogue and ultimately negotiate. So when we talk about leadership, we think of 5 things: inspiring, driving change, building high-performing teams, developing talent, and building a high-performing culture.
And George, what I would add to that is if that junior person, do you have a mentor? Do you have a secure base, someone that you could go to and someone that you trust, because you need an advocate for your ideas to help you build a coalition, if you will. And if you don't, then that would be the first place I would start, to look around and say, are there other like-minded people that maybe are a level or two above me that really understand that we should be thinking about a different process and a more, I'll use the term, humane, a more compassionate approach to the way we approach these. And the final thing I'll say is, George's definition of dialogue is to seek greater truth by thinking together. So that's the question. Is there someone there you could dialogue with that would help you be able to figure out how to find people that would understand the value of of your ideas? Any other questions?
No more at this time.
So, George, let me ask this final question, and then we'll close it. What advice would you give someone who is in a company that has to plan for a reduction in force? As much as we don't like to admit it, they become, since the early 80s and leveraged buyouts, and organizations figured out this was a strategy they could deploy. What advice would you give to people that are having to think about these kinds of things?
Well, if you're a leader in that organization, sit down with the people the people who are displaced, or the people who are being fired. Hear their pain. Let them scream. Let them shout. Let them express the emotion. And you can fire people. You can give pain to people and help them see the benefit beyond that. And the person giving the pain, they want to hear from the doctor who has a tragedy. They want to be able to talk to that doctor. The boss who is having to do this or making the decisions. Many leaders hide behind their walls because they don't want to hear the pain of people. And how to be able to engage other human beings in ventilating what is there, and then start thinking about or helping switch that mind's eye to some positive focus. How can this be an opportunity? And Ed, I know you know this. There are people who have fired people, dismissed people, and did it in a respectful, bonding way. And they may be thanked at that time, or in 2 months, 6 months, or 2 years, come back and say, thank you. I hate what you did to me. I hate what happened to me, but I really respect what you did. and in that way, I appreciate you as a leader. So you don't have to have people end in a negative state if you do that respectfully. But that means we have to be able to stand in front of pain, see it, hear it, listen to it, let it touch us, and help people as a secure base go through that pain.
And, yeah, excellent, very profound words, George. George, I can't tell you how grateful we are, because I know it's getting late in Switzerland. It's about 10 o'clock there.
10 o'clock.
You're 4 days into the High Performance Leadership Program. It's a very intense program. So we know this was a concerted effort on yours and your team's part for you to be able to be on this webinar with us. So again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much, George. You're a dear friend and mentor, and we appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Ed. And I just would say to all your listeners on this website or on this webinar that you are a very important force in life, and that you play a very, very important role in helping people go through the losses that are happening around the job displacement, but in all kinds of ways. And I wish you all the best in doing that.
Thank you much. Thank you much, and I'll see you in a couple, 3 weeks.
Okay. Thank you, Ed, and goodbye to all your listeners.
All right. All right. Bye-bye. Ashley, it's all yours to wrap.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. As you can see, Ed and George's contact information is here, so feel free to reach out to them at any time with any follow-up questions you may have. We will also be sending the link to this webinar out to you as a follow-up, so maybe you want to share it with some coworkers or somebody that came to mind. So thank you again for attending.